is Kroah-Hartman, and we are here at Open Source Summit in San Diego. And today we have with us Greg Kroah-Hartman. Greg, we talk so often. I mean, not that often, but still we talk often. So sometimes we run out of topics, right?
Yes.
We are like, oh, we talked about that, we talked about that. So I think one content theme that you're becoming kind of a security expert nowadays.
So I didn't want to become a security expert.
Before I go
yes.
there,
Yes.
I want to ask about the beard. Did you get a role in Game of Thrones, or
No,
what
no.
happened?
I joke. I had a meeting actually with Intel, and I had to go to Portland, so they don't let you into Portland unless you have a beard, right? It's the latest hipster thing. So now I grew it, and I just haven't shaved since.
So does that mean we will see Linus also? Because Dirk has beard.
Dirk
you
has a beard.
I'm also growing one.
Yeah, I don't know. I talked to Linus. Maybe when you see him, I'll see him in a couple of weeks. Last time I saw him, he did not have one.
Okay. So that could be a surprise, huh?
Maybe, yeah. It's fine.
That will also give press a lot of material to write about. Why is he growing beard?
Because we're lazy and we work from home and we don't want to shave.
So back to the serious topic is security, right?
Yeah.
Last year, it was a bad year for not only Linux but in general, because of Meltdown and Spectre, everything happened there. But as you mentioned, that it was also a learning lesson, and Intel did a lot of things to fix things. So where are we now?
So since the big announcement thing, we said last year I said there's going to be more of these coming, right? There's been more coming. We've had a number of these been released over the past year. 2 weeks ago, another one was released publicly. That again reduced your performance by 1 to 5%. No fun. It turns out there's a lot of these new issues that are coming out. People are figuring out how CPUs work internally and taking advantage of that, and you can leak data. An interesting thing about this stuff is, if you remember when Spectre Meltdown came out, the OpenBSD guys said disable hyperthreading. Like, we're worried about areas in this stuff. And it turns out OpenBSD was right. So they were right for a little bit of the wrong reasons, but they were right in that now Linux says disable hyperthreading. If you're running a system that you don't trust your users, you have to disable hyperthreading. And that's a huge hit. So on some workloads, it's a giant hit. On others, it isn't. But I would like to give full props to the OpenBSD guys for getting that right. They took the leap. They chose security over speed performance, and that's their mantra. And they were right for this one. Linux, now we give you the option to pick and choose what you want to do, security over speed. Some cloud providers have picked. I looked on my cloud provider the other day. They haven't updated their BIOS and enabled all the security features recently. Because the kernel, you can see what's looking underneath on the virtual machine. You can see if the host machine has actually enabled everything or not. One of mine hasn't, which is maybe not the best thing. But it's good. We at least give you the tools to disable or enable that and see what's going on. But there's more of these coming out. The interesting, cool thing about this is all the researchers are now finding these problems by reading the patents. So they look through Intel's patents and they're finding security bugs based on that. So if you look at all the research, all the stuff that was published in the past 6 months that came out during Black Hat and before that, it's all based on public knowledge and patents. So it's kind of funny. That's a little interesting tidbit there. So now you see researchers digging through to find out what the next thing is going to be and what next thing and so on. So yeah, it's been a fun year for security. We have a lot of these issues. Intel has gotten a little bit better, and they regressed, and they're getting a little bit better.
Because still we keep seeing news, the new family, because it's not a, new family of, Spectre, it's keep popping up,
Yeah, I mean, we knew these would be coming up, keep coming, and they do keep coming because the way these chips work internally is way beyond what we ever imagined, and turns out they took a lot of shortcuts in order to achieve speed. And when you take shortcuts, it turns out to be a side channel, and you can figure out what's going on. So, yeah.
So what is the ultimate, solution for this? New architecture or?
You have to fix the hardware. It's simple as that. So if you look at the last couple of things that have been announced, it was only Intel chips because they only took those shortcuts. AMD hadn't gotten there yet. PowerPC and ARM, they weren't affected because they worked internally differently. So you can redesign your hardware. So these are all hardware-specific issues. Some of them you can work around in the BIOS, and they can do that, but it comes down to they have to fix how the chips work internally. And they're doing that. So in a few years, we'll see new chips roll out from Intel or sooner that don't have these problems, and we won't have these vulnerabilities.
Okay, so there is kind of end in the sight. It's not like...
Well, it's a pipeline, right? So you'll see the end in sight for the stuff we found a year and a half ago, maybe next year, right? Because pipelines for chip companies are years long, right? So they can only do so much so fast. So yeah, but whether they keep ahead of all the issues that are coming, remains to be seen.
But even if they come up with the new, there are billions of machines already in the market,
Oh yeah, so I mean, you have to. So that's why we have to fix it in the operating system, right? We have to, and most of all these fixes they involve flushing things. So we have to, when we switch between the kernel and user space, or from one kernel task to another task, we have to flush buffers. And every time we flush buffers, things are slow, and that's how we fix these issues in the kernel. So we have to purposefully slow things down in order to make things secure. So we've fixed all the problems that are announced so far, but to do that, you have to take performance hits. So depends on what your workload is. I have one workload, it doesn't affect it at all. Other workloads, it affects it hugely, 15%. So
beyond this, when you look at the Linux, the kernel, just forget about Linux in general, because Linux is almost everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, Microsoft is running Linux. So in terms of security, new workloads are coming up. What are the challenges that you're seeing there, which from the kernel's perspective, that you're like, hey, this should not even be an issue?
Well, so there's two sides to security. There's reactive security of fixing bugs that come out, and then there's proactive security. Case Cook said it best, or was it Constantine? The kernel needs airbags. We need crumple zones, like an automobile. So the kernel security team has been adding these proactive fixes for years, new features. So we add new features to the kernel. Every kernel release, there's 3 or 4 new proactive security features that cut off whole classes of attacks. And that's the best way to solve these things, because we can't predict where, we always have buggy software, but if you take our buggy software and you take away whole classes of vulnerabilities, because you just can't exploit that buggy software anymore, that's our true solution. And we're doing that. We've been doing that over years, and that's the best solution. There was a meeting yesterday for the past 2 days for the security, kernel security, for the proactive security side. They're doing that. They're adding new features and they're making it better. So that's the best thing to do. Then there's the reactive side. I've been working on the reactive side on security at kernel.org. We react to the problems that are told to us. We fix them and we push out the fixes as soon as possible. And that's my goal, to get everybody to actually take the fixes, because that's the other side. We've been doing these fixes for 20 years and pushing them out there, but then nobody ever updated their devices. So I've been working with the Android vendors, and now Google mandates taking these fixes. In my talk, I showed that the Google Pixel team publicly analyzed, or the numbers I give is last year for 2018, they asked the security team asked the Android team to take a whole bunch of patches that they find based on the wild or what to do for security. 98% of them were all in the upstream LTS kernel release already before they had to be announced, or before they had to backport them. So if you just take the kernels that I release, the fixes are already there. So because of that, a lot of phone companies are now just taking the latest LTS release. It has all the fixes. They're in there before people realize that there's a security problem. I will call out Sony is doing a really good job with that. Sony actually updates the kernel all the time. Essential's another one. Pixel phones are good. They update the kernel and they make sure they take all these fixes before people realize that they were even a fix. And then Google's mandating that. They're starting to push that out and make their vendors do this more because they know that's the best way. So it's two sides. And also Google mandates a lot of these preventative issues too. They put them in their kernels and they test them, and they're in devices they're shipping. There's a whole bunch of preventative measures in the kernels to prevent future bugs from actually affecting anything.
So a lot of progress is being made in the last year or so.
Yeah, it's a constant, slowly forward progress, and it's going really good so far. So much so that everybody's now looking for bugs in the hardware below us, right? Not bugs in the software. People are still looking for bugs in the software. But there's other fuzzing efforts. The Google SYZbot guys are fuzzing the kernel like nobody's business. That's where you throw random data at it and see what happens. And they've gotten the tools really good. And this past week, they finally got USB support in their tool. So what they do is they look like a fake USB device, and they emulate sending bad data to the kernel. And then you send it just a little bit different way, and then you disconnect it, and you add it, and you do it. And they found tons of race conditions and bugs that have been there for a long time that would just crash your machine, but you could potentially create a malicious device if you have physical access. And they're fixing these problems. So Google's doing a lot of this work, and that's all done in public, which is great. So we're having everybody fix it. SYZbot's publicizing all these bugs that are in the kernel, and we're fixing them.
And what role are you playing in this? I mean, you are playing, So how, are these companies like, okay, they are realizing it on their own? Or because you have worked in past also with a lot of companies to make them more aware of that. What role are you playing?
Yeah, I have a marketing or advocating job in a way, is just going and convincing them. I've done this for a number of phone manufacturers. I've audited their kernels because they're like, no, we know what we're doing. We've cherry picked the right thing. So like, I audit their kernel and see what they've missed, and every phone manufacturer misses problems. So that's part of education process of saying the process you currently have is wrong, and you actually need to take the fixes and just take them all, because we actually know what we're doing. We're giving you 22 fixes a day. Why aren't you taking them? And it's good. I go around, I travel to different places, audit their kernels, and show them how they need to be doing things better. That's part of the Linux Foundation. It's the job is to make sure that Linux is a good, vibrant ecosystem and that people are using it properly. Because we're giving it to them. Why aren't they using it?
And beyond the focus on security, anything else that you're focusing on these days, or anything else you're excited about?
Yeah, the security stuff ends up taking a lot of cycles.
A lot of time, right.
So normal development efforts, patch review, the Kernel Mentorship program, I help out with the review of that, the application process, what people submit patches to the kernel as part of the application process, and teaching people how to get involved and what the development process is. I still work with that. Shua runs that, Shua Khan runs that. Hopefully you can talk to her this week. But she's doing a great job, but I help on the patch review part of that. So yeah, it's busy enough.
And Linux, she's also now a fellow.
She is. She's
so
a
I
fellow
was
Linux
asking her,
Foundation.
so what happened? Jim give us a sword at home, the fellowship of the kernel.
No, I mean, fellow's a traditional name in companies for people who are independent and work on projects on their own, and she definitely deserves that. And so yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned mentoring, so. We have talked about this earlier also. The maintainers are like, your beard is now white. Earlier I could not see how much white hair you have.
Yeah, you can't tell that I actually have gray hair.
So does that still concern you, or you are like not worried, or you really want more fresh blood there?
Well, we always want fresh blood, right? But if you look at the numbers John Corbett publishes, we're still getting 100 to 200 new people every release.
So the thing is that a lot of things which are problem for others, that is not problem for you. So I still ask a rhetorical question, but the thing is that you're right when you guys come up with a report.
Right, but to be fair, so an interesting thing happened last year when Lena stepped down for a month is we talked about what happens to the bus factor, right? If one of us gets hit, it turns out that we always...
Why everybody wants to hit them?
No, what happens if I get hit by the bus? Actually, I got hit by... let me follow this through. We always thought that I had access to write to some of these repos and things like that. It turned out I didn't, so we fixed that up. And then we added another person, so now there's three of us total, well, three including Linus that can write to his repo and do releases. And then on my behalf, I need somebody else to help with the stable releases. So Sasha Levin from Microsoft kernel developer, think about that, is helping me out with the stable kernel tree for many years. And actually we're sitting down this week and trying to figure out if all my crazy scripts to release a kernel, if he can do it. Because I think I can do it, but I do it from my scripts. We want to step through it all and make sure that if something happens to me, he can do it also, because he's a trusted developer. Same thing for Ben Hitchens from Debian. He's another stable kernel release maintainer. But I take part of what he does and publish it, but we need to have 3 people that can do this type of stuff in case something happens. And it'd be nice to take a vacation every once in a while.
Right. Yeah, you guys don't get any vacation
whatsoever. We don't get a vacation,
yeah.
No. I think I took one on a week this year.
So you trust Microsoft with the kernel stable branch? All the tinfoil YouTubers will be having a hard time now.
That's funny. Well, so, I mean, the Linux kernel development process is about not who you work for, it's about individuals, right? Sasha's been a developer for it. But it's so funny to say that, right? Yeah, I mean, actually, the head of the Microsoft kernel or open source group is KY, and he came from Novell, and he was an ex-AT&T engineer for years. I mean, he's a well-known, trusted, solid engineer and manager who's been involved in Linux, I don't know, for 20 years. So, I mean, it's crazy. But Microsoft realizes they publicly said that over 50% of all their Azure is running Linux, right? And so it's amazingly huge.
What happened to when Microsoft applied, to be on the private mailing list?
Oh, the Linux distros mailing list. There's Linux distros mailing list is composed of the various Linux distributions that they help do coordination of vulnerabilities releases. These hardware releases actually circumvent that. Intel never followed the rules, so they don't notify the Linux distros. But it's like when there's an open SSH problem, they all know, okay, next Tuesday we're gonna release and we'll all coordinate and make sure here's the patches and share them, and they work on that. To join that, there's a very well-documented list of things you have to do. And the interesting thing is, in order to be part of the mailing list, in order to do this, you have to do work. So you can't just be a consumer and say, just tell me what's going on. You actually have to do work, and you have to say, I'm signing up for this, I'm signing up for this, I will do this, I will respond. And they also have public lists of what people have done in the past month. So it's an interesting way to run a mailing list. It's a very good way to run a mailing list. But there's a well-documented process for how to join. And Microsoft really has a Linux distribution, just like for Azure and for some devices, and just like Amazon joined this group a number of years ago because internally Amazon AWS Systems is a Linux distribution, just like Oracle is a Linux distribution, Red Hat is, SUSE is, Canonical, Debian. They're all part of this list because they're Linux distribution to push this stuff out. So Microsoft joined. Sasha actually was the main contact for that. He's a well-known, trusted developer. So yeah, Microsoft now is part of that. It's kind of interesting.
Because I think Microsoft is now a Linux distributor.
Yeah, they are. Actually, somebody joked that they might be the largest distributor with the Linux on Windows thing, right?
98% of the market. I was talking to Richard Brown from OpenSUSE, and he was like, we love it because our tools are now accessible to 98% of the market.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So that's a great thing. Yeah.
It's fun, and I love seeing it because then people can see on the same machine at the same time how different operating systems run and take their pick for what they want to do, because you need developers to be able to run on your desktop the same thing that you're running in the server. That's why Linus has always famously said that you're not going to be able to have ARM in the server space until developers can have it on their desktop and rely on it there. And it's the same thing with this. These Windows developers are running in Azure. They need to have these tools and stuff on their desktop in order to be able to run these workloads that they're going to do later. And it's good. Microsoft is really good with developers, and they realize this, and they did a good job.
They should bring Steve Ballmer back.
Linux is a cancer. It's fine. It's funny, I mean, they're big companies. I mean, there's parts of IBM that hates Linux, right? It's the same thing.
No, I actually love it because this also shows that you said our goal was dominance. We dominate, and we did not even talk about it because
we won and nobody realized. So yeah.
And now even Microsoft is in your bag. They are applying for.
They make money on it, right? It's like any company. It's fine, and we welcome everybody to our, because everybody has different workloads, and we want to see Linux work for everybody.
Yeah. The problem is a lot of people, they worry that when these companies join, they will destroy Linux, but the fact is that they don't understand how open source works. That's not
everybody. The funny thing is Linux. Everybody contributes to Linux in a very selfish manner because you want to solve the problem for you.
And you want it to be selfish.
I want to know what your problems are and solve it, because it turns out that everybody has the same problems.
Right. You don't want it to be a charity.
No, it's not. So you're contributing back, and when you contribute, you're contributing to make it easier because it's easier for everybody to maintain it, and you don't have to maintain it on your fork. You try and maintain a fork, it actually costs you money and time. If you have money and time to waste, great, go off and do your own thing, NVIDIA. But if you don't, you can drag it back. And I mean, NVIDIA pays millions of bucks to have their own fork and their own stuff off on their own. NVIDIA's embedded group realizes they couldn't do it, and they're wonderful contributors to their kernel. So their embedded side is great because they realize they need to do that to sell chips. That's where they make money. We want people to contribute. Everybody contributes selfishly, and it helps out everybody else. Even Amazon's finally contributing to the kernel now, which is great. Yeah, they are. They've hired a number of kernel developers in the community. They're working, and they realize that it saves them time and money to contribute things upstream. It's a business decision, and it works out great. So David Woodhouse works for Amazon. So yeah.
Who?
David Woodhouse.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
There's a number of other people too.
Right.
Not to call it just David.
You may not want to talk about that, but I just want to talk about the desktop Linux. Everybody talks about next year will be desktop. Does desktop matter?
It matters to me because I've been using it for 20 years as my main work, so I want to make sure it works. It matters to a number of people because they actually want to be able to run what they're going to be making for the embedded device on their local machine.
Okay, so you're talking about developers.
So I'm talking about developers.
Yeah.
That's what matters to me. Matters to other people. Linux is a tool, right? If a tool there to help get you to do whatever you need to work, right? If you can find a better tool that lets you solve your work, that's great. I don't care whatever you use. Chrome OS actually is all Linux based, and that's a great tool it was like the #1 leading laptop seller for the past 2 years. Chrome OS laptops, and that's desktop Linux. So Linux succeeded there too, in a way. Again, it was a good tool that enabled people to do what they needed to do.
So you don't share the same concern of Richard M. Stallman?
Richard and I approach things from a different standpoint. There's the free software versus the open source software. My goal is to see that Linux succeeds. Okay, that's my main. I want to see Linux succeed and become a useful tool for everybody to use, because then they build upon it and it translates to be more successful for other people. I want to make it a tool that other people can build on and use. Richard has more lofty goals of different ideas. He has a more philosophical and more thing, and which is great. That's what he does. I focus on the technical this way. And the license he wrote for GPL2 was brilliant, and it was a wonderful thing, and we've used that. It's been very successful. Free software is wonderful. I like it. I support it. I license all my code under the licenses, and it works great. But on a philosophical standpoint, I don't necessarily agree with him on some things. That's fine. You don't have to agree with everything. I mean, all kernel developers, what do you have, 4,000 developers? We don't agree on anything. There's no common thing, except that we want to see Linux succeed, right? Richard wants to contribute to Linux. Great. He contributed the license. Wonderful.
The reason I ask a question because there is a lot of misconception. You can actually have a very privacy violating system built on top of Linux itself. So these are two different things.
You can do, yes. So Evan Moglen gave a talk at the Legal Summit yesterday, in a way talking about how people have seen the success of the free software movement and the way that copyright or copyleft has happened with open licenses. Why don't we take that same thing and use it for other things to help ensure privacy, to help ensure federation of services, and ensure freedom of different religion or different societies and things like that. And that's great, but you can't do that with a copyright license. You can't force people's behavior based on a copyright license. So maybe you need to do other things. And Evan's looking at what to do in other areas in order to help achieve those philosophical, wonderful, brilliant goals, in which laudable goals that should be achieved. But you can't do that with a copyright license. So you need to do other things. I'm focusing on the technology to create a tool that people then can use to build those, to achieve those things of what they want to do. Yes, you can use it for evil or good. It's a neutral tool that way. Hopefully you can use it for good. But again, the people contributing, I don't care what your necessary beliefs are. I just want to see that you are doing something to help this tool in this project. We have people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of different communities that are contributing to Linux because they want to see it work for them. And that's what I want to see.
I mean, Linux is seen as one of the most successful cases of copyleft as well as collaboration. But sometimes people try to use Linux as a kind of an example. But I say learn from Linux how it made the way community works. The way Linux, when I was talking to him, he said, I don't have any vision. I kind of distribute vision as well. People bring their own vision. They can do whatever they want to do with the kernel. I'm there just to help them.
Yeah,
Linux, the kernel.
We're there to be a tool to be used.
You don't have a vision. We want to take Linux there. No, the contributor will take wherever they want.
Right.
So everybody who looks at Linux, like when you talk Eben and everybody, they should also look at how the kernel community works, and embrace the work culture.
Yeah. So, and that's actually gets back to the main division of why GPL2 and GPL3. The kernel community really had some major objections to GPL3 because GPL3 was dictating on how the tool should be used. And it made some restrictions on how the tool can be used and the software can be used. And the majority of us in the kernel community did not want to have those restrictions. Now, people might think those restrictions are good and valid and achieve the goals of free software, which is wonderful and good, but that's not the goal for Linux. Linux's goal was to be able for everyone to use it. The only restriction is if you make a change, and we just want to see that change.
Right.
That's it.
So let's talk about some personal questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, now you live in Netherlands.
Yes.
Why?
We were living in Paris for a number of years, and now we live in the Hague. And it's a wonderful country.
It's a wonderful, beautiful country.
It's a great country. And
you fit in well there because everybody's tall.
My daughter made the observation yesterday. She's like, I couldn't find you in the grocery store. I'm used to the tallest person, but there's tons of tall people here. Yes, I fit in well. Actually, my family history is a little bit Dutch, so it works out well that way. My knowledge of the language is not very good. My family's studying it much more than I am.
But I think in Netherlands, most people speak English because whenever we used to go there...
it's the second largest country. 96% of the country speaks English? Yeah.
Compared to France,
compared to French.
Struggled. When we lived there, we would never be able to order pizza over phone. You can order pizza, but when it comes to topping, they just won't.
So yes, my French was bistro French. I could order, I could read a menu, I could pay, and that was about it. Cash and check. Dutch is much easier, so I'm learning to read menus in Dutch, but it's in English everywhere. But
so you're planning to stay there for a while?
Yeah, we'll be there for a while, at least till my son finishes out school for a while. But yeah, we love the country. It's really nice.
Perfect. And people always ask what operating system you use.
Oh, there's also a number of other kernel developers in The Hague.
Oh yeah,
There are. So I found, there's a number of other core kernel developers, a number of Red Hat developers. We meet once a month at the most beautiful hacker space I've ever seen is in The Hague. It's amazing.
Don't talk about Europe because I live
Stuff
in
like that. But it was
nostalgia.
like so there is an active open source community and a number of developers. Like universities are churning out Linux people all the time. So sorry, what was your other question?
No. Because when I used to live there, there is a very, you get the same feel, because US is big, and where I live in DC, but in Europe, wherever I live, we live in Germany, there was a community. We live in Belgium, there was a community.
Yeah.
So it's, everywhere you'll find, and a lot of people, like when we're moving over from Belgium, and I always used to wear Linux shirt, so the movers, so you use Linux? I said, yeah, I know. So when movers know, what is Linux.
There's a number of vans in The Hague that say Linux Solutions on the side, .nl. I don't know what the company does.
Yeah.
They do IT stuff, but I see the Linux van everywhere.
There's a lot of awareness there about it. And a lot of kernel developers are from Europe, most of them.
Yeah, the community is huge. Actually, so it's nice being there. I can take a train ride to different conferences.
Oh, yes.
It's very nice. So there's going to be a conference in The Hague soon. Not for kernel people, for Cloud Foundry, but there's the kernel recipes one in Paris. It's a short train ride away. I'll be there. Yeah. That's a good one, and there's other ones. Yeah.
Now the second question was that what operating systems you guys use?
What do I use? I use Linux.
No, of course, the kernel is
Linux. My watch is Tizen.
Okay.
So my family uses some. My son's school actually mandates that they all have MacBooks.
Okay.
It's interesting. So he has a MacBook. My wife has a MacBook, and that's about it.
So, and which distribution do you use?
I use Arch. I don't use OpenSUSE anymore. I use Arch. And my build system, I think, is actually running Fedora. I have a number of virtual machines still running Gentoo, Debian, Fedora to do some testing on some user space tools. But yeah, all my laptops and everything switched over to Arch these days.
One thing, I also use Mac one thing I like about Mac was when I discovered, because when I was buying Mac, I talked to you also, about it. But when I discovered Terminal, I was running Ubuntu on my Mac for almost, and but once I found Terminal, I was like, it's Linux, basically. I have 3 Mac machines. I SSH into that, and I just do everything,
Yeah. Chrome OS actually is now, I have a Chromebook that I play around with, and you can run Linux applications, and you can, of course, SSH into anything.
Yes.
But Chromebook is cool, and I have a test Chromebook that I play around with, too.
So I use my Mac as Linux. That's the UI I get. It's much better, but I just use it because I play mostly in Terminal, and you can do much more in that.
Yeah. Well, with virtual machines, too. Under Windows and under OS X, you can do a lot of Linux stuff.
Why did you choose Arch?
Why did I choose Arch? I moved away from Gentoo a while ago. Why did I choose Arch? At the moment, it had something that I needed. I don't remember what it was, the latest development version, whatnot. And I've known a number of the Arch developers over the years. Their idea of a constantly rolling, forward-moving system is the way to go. I helped create Tumbleweed for OpenSUSE at the time, a long time ago. It's neutral, it's community-based, it has everything I need.
Yeah.
It works really, really well. I've actually converted my cloud instances that I have all over to Arch. So it works really well. It's nice.
If you're an Arch user, you'll tell that that's a joke. And I also wrote a very good tutorial about it, which is one of my all-time popular tutorial. Only issue I have with Arch is Plex server.
Okay, yeah.
Every time I run the R packages, it breaks every single time. But the good thing with Arch is, when you're building, you get all the comments from users. They tell you, okay, this is going to break. You can fix that.
Yeah.
That is
the Arch, the wiki is amazing. The documentation is like one of the best resources out there.
It's not about Arch. It's the whole,
Totally. If you look up any user space program and how to configure it and use it, it's actually the systemd Arch wiki pages are one of the most amazing resources out there.
Yeah. So Arch community is, as I said, I was, when I was a pure Linux user, now I have traveled so much, I don't have time to bring 2 machines, so I just use Mac mostly. But when I was Linux user, I was an Arch user, and I just love it.
Yeah.
Because you keep the system update all the time, and contrary to belief, because when you make minor incremental changes, the system doesn't break. System break when you upgrade the whole.
Yeah, and also
machine.
one of the main policies of Arch or philosophies is you stay as close to the upstream as possible. And as a developer, I want that because I want to see, and they're updating their kernels all the time. They patch very little, but they're really good in actually feedback to the community because I want that testing. I want to make sure that things are fixed. If it is broken, I learn about it quickly and I fix it and push the stuff out. So that's actually a really good feedback loop. And that's some of the reasons I needed because I was looking I was using the latest. I was modifying systemd or modifying some other user space stuff, and I wanted the latest versions of everything. Fedora is great too, but it was like 6 months behind on some things. Fedora is also nice for them, but the whole you have to stop your machine, update it, which is I understand why they do that and whatnot, and you can switch to Rawhide and stuff like that. Debian's also good for other things. Oh, cool fun fact about Debian. And the cloud, the thing is, it's not a corporate thing anymore. With a huge growth of Linux in the cloud, the numbers is something insane. Like 80% of the world's Linux servers are running either a Debian or a kernel.org kernel. And it's not that Red Hat and SUSE has lost market share. It's just that the growth of everything else is so giant. And the kernel.org based system is like the AWS's kernel, which is from kernel.org with a few patches, Azure's kernel, kernel.org with a few patches. And are kept up to date. So, and Google Compute Cloud, same idea. So when companies only try and deal with other companies, they shut out the huge majority of systems. Actually, all community-based. It's amazing. Debian is actually really good, and it runs the world.
It does, yes.
So it's great, and it's a nice stable base that people work on, and Debian developers are great. I don't use Debian, but those guys.
Yeah, my server runs on the TFIR. It runs on Debian server on.
Yeah, and they keep it up to date, and they handle the security backwards. I don't agree with some of the philosophies about what that, but what they do is they do it really, really well.
Yeah, that's it. I think we have covered a wide range of topics today. And anything else you'd like to? Any message you have for the crowd?
Nah, I can't do anything.
So, Greg, thank you so much for talking to me today. And as usual, I look forward to talk to you and see you again soon.
Yeah, see you some other country, other continent, right?
Perfect. And please keep the beard.
Okay, I'll see.